Hello, my name is Jacob Urbina. I am a fourth year biomedical engineering major. I got into e-NABLE my freshman year, and all of you are part of this, right? You're interested in some aspect. Cool. And so I'm super big into prosthetics, giving people accessibility. Between sophomore year and junior year, I was approached by Autodesk to host some of these things. And so I got to work with them a little bit and trained as a CAD TA basically. And so that is basically my experience with all this CAD stuff. I've been really into designing cool things. How many of you are BMEs specifically? 1, 2, cool.
I used to be, but I transferred.
Look, there's no shame in that. We get it. We get it.
Yeah. Now I'm a Mickey, so.
Cool. So there are really cool experiences that you can have with CAD. Our degree at least focuses mainly on SolidWorks, and I believe the ME degree also does as well. And so this is just another CAD program that you can put on a resume that looks really good to employers to say oh, I'm good at CAD, right? And so before we get started, thinking in terms of what is CAD, right? And so it's the idea of modeling and doing 3D rendering within a virtual space. So it stands for computer-aided drafting, which means I can have two-dimensional plane sketches, and let's extrapolate that into an actual model that we can use to 3D print, that we can use to mill, and just basically create what we want to create. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my workspace. So when you open up Fusion 360, it should look something like this. Does everyone have something similar? Cool. So this is our basic general UI. And so up on the top, you have all the different mechanisms that you can use for solid shapes, different types of modification tools, just a variety of stuff. So if you want to build complex machinery, you can do assemblies and components, construction geometries, you can double check your measurements. This one's a really fun one, inserting different things. So let's say you have a reference geometry that you want to model off of. So I have a car, right? Let's see. I can put a 2D picture of that car and then model off of that. So that way I have that sort of reference to describe. And so let's just begin basically. So with e-NABLE, my favorite thing to teach is always let's just design a finger, right? Super easy, super simple, and it's got some pretty decent geometries. So what does a finger basically look like if you were to break it up into just purely shapes?
Probably just a cylinder and then maybe a half a sphere on the end.
Yeah, perfect. And so let's try to make that. So we have up at the top left, we have create sketch. So if we click on that, we can then pick any of our 3 planes that are in the middle. So if we want to build, let's just say a fingertip, we can start on the bottommost plane and create our cylinder from there. So if you don't mind clicking that. Now, instead of being in an isometric view, we have given a completely 2-dimensional space. So what this should do for us is allow us to actually sketch as if we're drawing something on a piece of paper. So if you can notice up at the top, everything that we once had has changed dramatically. We have a new create tab, new modify, different types of constraints. And this is all to help in figuring out how you want to draw. And so if we're going to build a cylinder, let's take it from 3D and narrow it back down to 2D. The original face of that cylinder would be a circle. So we can go to our create tool and have center diameter circle. Click that. And then once it's highlighted, you will have a new crosshair. If we go to the origin, we can click on the origin, and you don't even have to drag, just move your mouse, and it now creates a circle. Is everyone there? Cool. So just for now, let's specify the diameter of the circle as 100 millimeters. Your dimensions can be different. It's perfectly fine. If you want to change dimensions, they will be up in document settings, and you can have different units for whatever you need to. But for now, let's just have 100. Doesn't really matter what units you're in. Okay. So now that we've created a circle, we see that it has a little blue ring around it. And this means it's actually quite variable. So if at any point in the design process, we can go back and change this diameter to what we need it to be. However, we can actually make that more defined. So if instead we take this circle and then specify it to be 100 millimeters, it locks it in, and now that has become a constrained geometry. And that means everything is constrained and defined within that circle. Sound good? Cool. So now we can finish sketch, and you just made your first circle. Now it comes to the exciting part. Now we can actually create a three-dimensional object out of this. And so if we wanted to extrude this face that we made, we can go up to the box right next to the create sketch up on the top left, known as the extrude tool. If this is too far away from like your actual like plane of reference, you can also just type E on your keyboard, and that gives you the same exact properties. Once you extrude, you can select the circle face and then drag up to however tall you want it to be. Does everyone have a basic cylinder? I'm gonna take that as a yes.
If we like accidentally like drew something we didn't want to, how do you like delete it, I guess?
Depends on where you are. You can Control Z if you're like right there. We also have the design timeline up at the bottom or down at the bottom. And so let's say, for instance, I want to go back. You can go back in your timeline and it goes to your previous sections. So same thing, you can also, I believe, right click that and delete previous features. And same thing on this navigation tool. On this left side, you have drop downs for everything that you create. And so let's say, for instance, I don't want this sketch anymore. I can just delete it. But it may be constrained to different geometries that you extrude off of. So you just have to be wary about that. Cool. So that's how you create a basic cylinder. You don't have to do that every time. So if you want to hit down the drop down on create, you're given a wider array of options that you can create different shapes from. So you can see right here, we have a cylinder. So we could have just bypassed that, but it's helpful to like understand the geometries and shapes. So let's try to make a sphere now. So if you open that create dropdown and see sphere, you can now hover over your original 3 planes that we had at the beginning, or the 2 faces that were created off of the cylinder. And it's important to note that the only places that you can sketch off of are flat planes. So we can't actually create a sphere off the sides of the cylinder, but just the top and the bottom. Does that make sense? Okay. So from here, if you look at the top right cube on your plane, you can actually click and hold on anything, on any part of that cube, and it allows you to rotate your drawing. This is very helpful if you want different point of views, perspectives, anything that you need. And if you ever get a funky view, if you just click the Home tab, which is right in the left corner of that keyboard, you can get right back to home. So since we have our sphere, we can select the top planar face and now sketch from the origin again. It should create a red ball. Does everyone have that? Cool. And so we can drag this arrow to whatever dimension it needs to be. So let's just have the same diameter as the cylinder. Okay, so now we have to be careful. If we look at this little navigation tool on the right side, we have face, diameter, operation, and we can press OK. What do you think happens if we press OK right now?
Oh, since it's in cut, it's gonna make like a. It's not gonna make a circle. It's just gonna make a cut into the cylinder.
Exactly. And so there are different operations that we can choose. And so since it's automatically deemed a cut, since we're saying that, hey, it's on a specific geometry that we've already established, once we create a new geometry, we're assuming that that's cutting into the one that's already been made. So in this instance, we want to create a join operation. So you click on the drop down, click join, it changes colors, and then now you can press OK, and this has become one body. So something that we can do to hollow this out a little bit, like let's say we want to put a mechanism in the fingertip for like a prosthetic finger, right? It doesn't really work too well if it's like dense and solid. So we can go to our modify tool, shell, and what this will do is if we select the bottom face, we can create a thickness that stays constant throughout the entire body. So if we press OK, now it's essentially like we have an empty little capsule head. Or like a thimble. A thimble's a good example. Cool. Is everyone following along? Everyone feel good about this? So the biggest issue that we have right now is that does this look like an actual fingertip? Not really. So there are other things that we can choose to do to make it a little bit more organic. And so this is what I most prefer in designing a lot of this stuff. So for instance, like we were saying earlier, we can go down to the bottom, drag everything in our timeline back to the beginning, right click and delete all features after history mark. And it's basically like you started over. From here, we can go up to this purple cube called create form at the top of the bar. Once we create form, we're given a new set of parameters, and we can basically do everything that we did at the beginning. So we have a cylinder that we can choose from. So we click on the cylinder, click on the bottom plane, start at the origin, and give it a specific diameter. Now, instead of just being a circle, we're actually given some form or shape. So you can actually edit this as well. If you double click on the entirety of a line, it will highlight the entire circumference. So I don't know if it's easy to see on my screen, but I take this section, just click it once, and I get this section. But if I click it twice, it highlights the entire bit. From here, we can go to Modify and Edit Form. And now we're given this weird funky set of like random arrows and squares. That's actually super helpful, super important, because with this, we can drag to create much taller cylinder. We can rotate it to make a twisty cylinder. Translate it. You can do a bunch of things. And so just for now, we can just make it just a little bit taller and press OK. Same thing, instead of a sphere, we can now make a quad ball. Now we don't have a top surface geometry anymore, so we can go back to the bottom and repeat. A quad ball of radius, or of diameter 100. It'll automatically create a new body. From the body tab, we can right-click, move copy. And from there, you can move the entire body as a whole. So does everyone have something that looks a little bit like this?
Wait, what did you click to move the whole sphere?
So you go to the Bodies tab on the left,
Oh, okay, I see.
Body 2, right-click, and then move copy. And once you're happy with where you've moved it, you can press OK. And now we have something similar to what we had before. I'm gonna just show briefly like what you can do to save time, but just assume that you can do this for the rest of the ball. But if you want to take away specific faces, so let's say we want to hull out this as well, you can just delete the face. So highlight a face, press delete, and all these faces slowly go away. To where if you wanted to, let's say the entire bottom half is completely removed. You can connect that circumference, modify, and I believe it's merge edge, to a second edge. Let's say it's that one. Press OK. And then those geometries have now come close together.
Wait, which button did you use to push those, or to get that, to do that?
Yeah, so let me go back. So if you delete some faces, you can double click on one of the edges. So it highlights the entire edge. Go to your top bar, do the modified scroll down, go to merge edge, which keeps your highlighted edge. You need to change to edge group 2. Click on that arrow, and then double click the top of the cylinder. Press OK, and then it merges those edges. And you can do that for like any type of form that you want. There will be issues with like making sure the correct number of segments line up. But for now, like with quad ball and cylinder, that should be fine. Okay. So cool. Now we have something funky. We can go back to Edit Form on the Modify tab. And this is where it gets super versatile. So let's say I want to make a thumb, right? The thumb, at least in a hitchhiker's thumb, is like a little bit more up with flatter like thumb tip, right? So let's select just the top vertice, and you can drag that up. Okay. We can also modify these edges. So instead of double clicking, you can hold Control and pick multiple edges at a time. let's see. Here, I can rotate it, extend it out, make essentially like a fingernail almost. Okay. You can also modify faces. So if you want to modify those two faces, you control them, and then you can pull it in, bring it out. I don't know whose thumb this is, but like I feel bad for him, I'm not gonna lie. But this creates like more dynamic forms, something that looks more organic. And so I really appreciate the form tool a lot because you can be less specific with the exact measurements and more realistic and human-like, which I find very valuable. So if you were to finish form now, you'd be presented with a wide array of errors, okay? So how many of you are like familiar with like how 3D printing works? A little bit, yes, no? Okay. So the idea is basically you have surfaces, and from those surfaces you can extrapolate like interior volumes, and that's what the 3D printer looks at. And so we don't exactly have a completed surface because we have this hole right here. So our surface and form looks fine, but we assume that it's infinitesimally thin and not an exact shape. So in order to fix that, let's see. Oop. Cancel. We can modify fill hole, select your edge, and then it fills that hole for you. And once you're done, you can press OK. And then finish form. And then now, it looks exactly like a body that we were working with earlier. Does that make sense?
Could you say where the fill hole button is?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So fill hole is under modify. Again, just click the modify drop down. And then within, I believe, the third little window, you have fill hole. And like the cool thing about this as well is like it'll all tell you like what each thing does. So if you're ever like, what does uncrease do? It'll give you like a brief description as well. It'll help tell you. So yeah, so that's a basic little fingertip. Okay. So let's see. So we can go back in our design timeline, delete that as well. So let's say, for instance, we want to make like a joint, right? Let's see if I can stop sharing this screen and find something online. So one of the fingers that we base a lot of our designs off of is the nick finger. And so this is what our prosthetic fingers will look like. So let's try to model something that looks a little bit like this. This is going to be your proximal phalanx joint that allows for rotation. Okay? Easy enough, right? You guys got this. So let's get back into Fusion. Okay. So we know we need a cylindrical base and we know we need cylindrical caps. So what should we do to start off with first?
Make the cylindrical base.
So we can go down to the create. We can actually just hit cylinder this time. Sketch on the bottom plane. Same thing. Just do 100. Enter. And now you can scroll up and down immediately. Press OK. And boom, we got a little base. So now here comes the fun part. Now we have to figure out how to make the little end caps, okay? Well, there isn't really much reference geometry that we can make off of here, right? Like we have the 3 middle planes, but from looking at the device, like those aren't necessarily in the middle. So something that we can do is go to our construct menu. And if you look at the different constructions that you can make, this basically creates reference planes that you can allow for different geometries. So we can do an offset plane of one of the vertical planes. And let's just do it about 30 out. Okay. And so now we have 2 different planes that we can pick from that are parallel to one another. So if we wanted to sketch, we can click Create Sketch up at the top, select the new plane that we just made, and it looks 2D and sketches exactly where that is in 3D space. So instead of the normal circle that we usually do, we can go to the Create dropdown again and see that circle has a little arrow by it. And for this case, we can actually do a 2-point circle instead of a center diameter circle. And this is more advantageous because we can zoom in right at the edge and then draw up without having to specify where our exact radius is and like having to work back from there. So let's go to about, let's do about 60. And so once you have a circle with a diameter of 60, we can finish sketch. Rotate our cube, or rotate our body, and see that we now have a sketch that is in that same plane that we just created. Now we're going to get super fancy and create another offset plane from that one. So the offset plane is just the most basic of the construct. So if you just want to click the construct plane instead of having to do the drag down, you can do that as well. And now essentially the sketch that we made becomes a plane. And so you can create a sketch off of that and then bring that right to the edge of the base that we created earlier. From here, we can create another sketch. And since we established our geometry radius from the first circle, we can now sketch on the new plane with a center diameter circle. And it remembers that origin. And so let's, in this case, actually draw it smaller. So instead of 60, we'll try 40. And then finish sketch. And so now we should have 2 smaller sketch circles in parallel with one another. Now we can do what's called a loft. So instead of extruding, what lofting does is it takes one geometry shape and then extrudes it to a different geometry shape. And so as you can see, like in the example, you can go from a square to a circle, but in our cases, we're just going to do a circle to a circle. So click on the loft from underneath the create dropdown. Gives you a new menu. You can click the first big circle, and then the second little circle, and then press OK. Now we have a little joint cap. And so this is basically just a little bitty frustum. And from here, on that smaller circle, we can click on that, create another sketch of an even smaller circle. So same thing, it remembers the center geometry. We can have this one at about 30 of the diameter. Finish sketch. And then now if you hover your mouse over the new geometries that you made, you see that you have the smaller circle and you have the outer ring that you can choose from. We can hit the extrude button up at the top on just the little circle, so not including the outer ring. And then we can actually cut into the cap a ways so that we can have like room for screws, or room for bolts. And then once you feel okay with the cut, you can press OK. You have a little cap. And again, if you wanted to make another smaller circle, actually bridge the hole, perfectly fine as well. I think it'd be better, but this is just for the time being. So now we want to create an entire cap on the other side, right? So do we just start completely over, do the same exact like motions and stuff one-on-one? Is that wise? No. So you already did the hard work. Let's utilize that hard work. And so if you go underneath the create window again, you can have mirror. And so if we click on mirror, we now have a new drop-down where it says faces. Now, normally you don't really want to work with faces, especially in this instance. So we need to change that to bodies. And once we change it to bodies, we can highlight the new cap that we made. We can select mirror plane and just do it over the middle axis plane that we had originally offset it from. You can press OK, and now you have dual caps. Cool. And at any point, so let's say we're going to now try to connect them to the base, but it doesn't really work whenever I do a frontal view because now I can't see the back edge of the cap. If you want to go to the drop down on bodies, you can see that the mirror images are different bodies of one another, and the little eye button you can actually click and it turns it off. So you can see through the geometries. Okay. So now we're going to sketch on the back of the copied face, or copied cap face, if that makes sense. So the big circle that's facing the inside of our joint. Once we're here, we can go to line up at the top. Find about halfway. Yeah, halfway up on the outer circumference. You can click that. And then now just drag completely down, perpendicular to the base. And then once you hit the edge of the base, you can click that again. Now, it should still be trying to put a point somewhere, so we can take that line and connect it to the bottom of the cap. And what that does is create this little curved edge and exits you out of the line tool. So we can finish sketch from here. And what this does is it used the original sketch circumference from our circle as one of the edges of this like little bendy triangle, I guess. Then we had our right angle, and it establishes its own little sketch plane. Okay. So we can bring back the cap body again. And so now we're going to connect these two by hitting the extrude button. And instead of just dragging to one face to another, something we can do is on the right panel, we can, instead of distance, click that drop down and then go to object. And once you're at to object, you can just select the back of the face and it immediately drags there. And so that's really helpful. If again, you need to go back and modify anything, it remembers that it's to that exact face and not to a specific distance. And so no matter like what happens, like your geometry will stay the same. And our operation is join again, and we can press OK. So now we have a little rotating jaw. Everyone tracking along? Cool. And so these are just some basic fundamentals of CAD design, basic shapes, basic geometries. There's a lot of other cool stuff that we can get into that we can do for a later workshop. So like we wanted to modify, we can do fillets. And so fillets, you can select an edge and it basically softens that edge. And so if we wanted a softer ring, we can create a softer ring, something like this. Yeah, press pull, dividing geometries, different types of more form stuff. And then one of my favorites, which I do want to save for a different workshop, is instead of design, so on the top UI bar, you can scroll down on design to generative design, where the computer actually designs your part for you, which is really cool. And so like you give it, so like the way that we're working here, right, is we have an idea in mind and we're like, okay, I want to form this from nothing, okay? However, in generative design, it's like, I have these constraints that I want to build around, and computer, I need you to build that for me. And so it looks at like different loads, it looks at different like constraint geometries. We'll find the best solution for the manufacturing method. So you can get some like really cool shapes that you could never like actually design in person. So really cool. And that can be one for another workshop. But I know it's getting a little bit late, and it has been some good work. So are there any questions moving forward?
Real quick, when you were doing that, like you were drawing on the circle face and you got to that point that was basically like a quarter up, if that makes sense, and then drew down, how did you get it, how did you get to that point? Because I was like kind of catching up a little bit.
So, get back. Okay. So from here, if you want to turn off body number 4, at least that is for me, you're just left with this cap. From here, you can do create sketch on the cap back face. Go up to line from that part of the circle, just straight downward to the base. And then once you click it, you should still have the line wanting to finish. And you can click that to the bottom of the circle. And then once that's done, it sees that, so this constraint right here means tangential. So it's constrained that way. This is a perpendicular. And so from here, we can finish sketch. And this new sketch plane is made. Is that tracking?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so from here, you can do extrude, You press E, something like that. You can go whichever way you need to. You can do one-sided, two-sided. So like, let's say you want to have it this way, just a little bit. You can. Yeah, it's up to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What's the most interesting thing or like coolest thing you've catted?
Listen, I've let's see actually. I have a lot of weird projects. When I first got into it, like I did a lot of stuff for like my mom. So I made like a daffodil necklace, basically. Projects. Oh, I've been making an orange juicer, or like a class ring. Those are kind of cool. Oh, those are both with like forms / rotating, which is another really cool thing that you can. Let's see. So here's a little ring design that I tried to make a while back. And so all these green lines are basically symmetry geometries. And so like, let's say I want to modify this face. It highlights the rest of the faces. And so if I move this one, it moves the rest. And so that creates more symmetrical forms. Let's see, my orange juicer. Just dealing with like rotating things. There's a really cool tutorial on building a lamp, which I can like link later and send through the e-NABLE newsletter. But it's basically just like build a weird curve, create a section, and then like rotate it, mirror that, and rotate it again, so it makes like a little lattice structure. It's really cool. But yeah.
Nice.
And so I will drop my individual email in the Zoom chat. If anyone like has questions, has like different like design things that they're looking to do, like it can be with e-NABLE, it cannot be with e-NABLE. Like just let me know. I'm always down to like help doing the cool design things. Like part of the fun that got me into CAD myself was like trying to build an impossible cube, like an impossible dovetail, which is like, if you've seen what it is, it's like top cube, bottom cube, but it's joined by trapezoids on all 4 sides. So like it looks, let's see if I can look it up. It looks like it's not supposed to like actually work, but it's a really cool design challenge to like actually build it. So it's like this on all sides. So, yeah. Like the fun thing about CAD is like you can literally just do whatever you want to with it. Yeah, just have fun is basically the idea. And so if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm usually available as much as possible, especially via Zoom. But yeah, that's all I have. Any lasting questions, feel free to ask. I'll be on until like maybe 8. And if you guys have to go, no pressure. And
Thank you so much. That was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.